Howdy, everybody. Right now, what we're going to talk about is how to find a polynomial when you are given the roots, which remember, roots are the same things as your x-intercepts, your zeros, and your solution. So, basically, what we're doing, this is the example problem. All this stuff down here technically are the steps for how to solve example 5. Okay, so what we're going to be doing now, we're going to be kind of working in the reverse order. Up until this point, what has happened is I have given you a polynomial and you have found your solutions, just like we did back here. Okay, so in these problems, I gave you a polynomial and you had to solve for x, which then you found your zeros, your roots, your x-intercepts, your solutions. They mean all the same thing. Okay? So this time we are working the reverse way. This time I am giving you your x-intercept, solutions, roots, zeros, and you have to try to find the polynomial in standard form. So given the roots, find the equation in standard form. Now, before we actually talk about how we do this, let's just kind of recap what we've been doing, and then after we recap what we've been doing, we're going to work in the reverse order to solve example 5. So normally, like when we were back here in these examples, I gave you a polynomial and you had to solve for x. Okay, so before I gave you a polynomial like so, remember the equation had to equal 0, which this one already equals 0, so we're already all set. Now we're going to skip the step above it. So right now I'm kind of working backwards in the problem to show you what we normally do. Okay, so I'm going to skip this next step. This next step is not helpful for when we're solving. Okay, so before what I did was I gave you a polynomial. The next step was to try to factor, which when you have 3 terms and your highest exponent is a 2, that's an x squared. I know it's kind of off, sorry guys. But anyways, when your highest exponent is 2, you have a quadratic. So when you have 3 terms and a quadratic, which factoring technique do you use? So how do I get from here to here? Okay, so we're skipping this step right here. Okay, well, how you get from this step to this step, the factoring technique we use with 3 terms is general factoring. Okay, which general factoring, the way I taught you how to factor general factoring is through slide and divide. So this is our factored form right here. And then remember, you guys, now that I have one factor times, remember there's secretly a multiplication symbol there, one factor times another factor equals 0. Well, if that's going to happen, if something will multiply to equal 0, then at least one of the factors must be 0. So using the zero product property, to get from this step to this step, remember what we would do is we'd set each factor to 0, because at least one factor equals 0. Okay, so this step is called the zero product property. You set each factor equal to 0. Okay, and then the last thing we do to solve for x, well, we would just get x on one side by itself and solve for x. So like on this one, you have to subtract 2 on both sides, which 0 minus 2 is negative 2. And this one you would add 1 on both sides, which 0 plus 1 is 1. So to get from here to here, all you're doing is solving for x. And then you find your zeros, your roots, your x-intercepts, and your solutions. Okay, well, in example 5, we are reversing the order. Okay, we are starting from here. So we're starting with your zeros, roots, x-intercepts, and solutions, and we're trying to work our way to the polynomial. Okay, so at this point, you guys, you can start copying down example 5. This is example 5. If you want to write these steps, and you can. This was just kind of recapping, though, what we have been doing at this point. So this right here is example 5 completely worked out. Okay, if you see here, example 6 only has the roots. Okay, so normally in a problem like this, I would only give you the roots, and you would have to find the polynomial. Okay, but the reason why I went ahead and worked it all out was because I think that you guys, since you're so smart, you can figure out what I did to get from my zeros or roots to my polynomial, because we're actually doing something that we've kind of already done before. You just don't even know it, okay? So I'm going to walk you through step by step how we solve example 5. Okay, so like this is the problem, and at the very end, this is your answer. And these are all the steps in between. Okay, so I'm going to take you step by step. So how we get from our starting point to our next step? Okay, well, Remember, to get from here to here, basically all that happens, what happened to my negative 2 and 1? Where did they go to get from here to here? Well, we simply just moved negative 2 and 1 to the other side of the equation. Like I added 2 on both sides to get here, and I subtracted 1. So essentially we moved and rearranged our equation and we made one side equal 0. Okay, so we make one side of the equation equal 0, or we just brought everything over to one side of the equation. Okay, now this next step, how we get from here to here, well, there's not much that we did. Okay, we basically just put each of these into factors, or our factored form. So this is our factored form. Okay, now, if you have two parentheses side by side, what do you do with both of those parentheses to get something that looks like this? What would you do with these two parentheses? Holy hot dog, you guys are so smart. You would distribute. Okay, so all we're doing is distributing the factors. Okay, and then from here, all you do, what do you do to get from this step to this step? I have the x squared and I have the negative 2, but something has happened to the x's. What has happened to the x's? Well, all I did was I combined my like terms. So the last step would be to combine like terms. Okay, so these are all the steps that have worked out to get from your roots to your standard form. Now, a shortcut for you guys. Technically, you don't have to start from here and go here. Technically, you can start from your roots and automatically go into your parentheses. Technically, you don't have to do this step. So I could have said x equals negative 2, and I could have written in factor form. Now, do you guys see a shortcut for how I can get from x equals negative 2 to x plus 2 and x equals positive 1 to x minus 1? Well, simply what you can do is flip the signs. So since this was a negative 2, when I write it in factored form, it will change signs. So it'll be x plus 2. This, since it's positive 1, when you write it in factored form, you just flip the sign. So it'll be x minus 1. Okay, so I am going to show you how to do example 6. Example 6 will flow. We're going to go down in example 6. We're not going to work our way backwards in example 6. In example 6, we're going to start from the top and work our way to the answer. Okay, but when I show it to you, I'm not going to write this step. I'm automatically going to go from here to here. And all I'm going to do is flip the signs. Okay, so if you'd like to try example 6 on your own, you can go for it. You can include this step, but you don't have to. Okay, well, let's get going on example 6.